Hey geeks, welcome to another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're back. We were off last week, and we're back with somebody I've been wanting. I haven't seen in a long time. Number one, and I've been super excited to have him on the show. And his name is Billy Hollis. I've known Billy for a long time. I never miss his sessions. If you guys have watched my tweets in the last couple of weeks. He's one of the user experts, user interface experts that I know. And also one thing I like about Billy is that he says things in no nonsense kind of way. And I like that. And since he runs a company, then he's got a lot to share. I think this episode is going to have to be a lot longer, but we're going to try to cut it off at an hour, because I think once Billy and I get going about this stuff, it might be really hard to shut us up. So anyway, so welcome to show number 63, the first one in August. And I hope you're all having a great weekend. Summer's finally here in San Diego, which means it's like 80 degrees along the coast for me. So those of everybody else in America dealing with shitty weather, just remember, you always have an invite to come to San Diego and hang out with me along the beach here, and get away from all that crazy weather that we're having in America, because we don't really have that in San Diego. It's one of the best things about living here is we really don't have much weather at all, which is great. All right. So our friends in Ukraine are still struggling with this terrible, terrible war. So and things are not going well. I heard somebody blew up parts of a nuclear plant this week, and so things aren't getting better. So please keep our friends in Ukraine in your minds, and if you can help out in any way, please do, because like I say every week since it started, I want to go back to Ukraine. I've been wanting to go back ever since I was there in 2015. And I have been seeing more hits on dotnettips.com from the Ukraine. So hopefully that's a good sign. So hopefully things getting, I don't know what's going on there, because of all the crazy stuff in America. They don't talk about the Ukraine much anymore here, unfortunately. So anyway, but we need to think about that until this terrible war is over. Don't forget, I'm so excited. Next Friday, 6 days from today, is the Code Quality and Performance Virtual Conference. I'm so excited. Last year, we had over 72,000 people watch this conference, which tells me there's a big hole about talks about code quality and performance in our world. And so it's coming back this Friday. We have a great list of sessions. It's only one day. We only have one track. But here, we have some great sessions about architecture patterns, debugging. We all need to be better at debugging, static code analysis, building better software, talk about the editor config, which it's still a mystery, even though I've been using it for a long time and I spend a lot of time on it. It still seems like a magic box to me a little bit. Code quality and infrastructure as code. And then I'm finishing off the conference with Rock Your Code, everything that every .NET developer needs to know about disposable types. So, because I've reviewed millions of lines of code in my .NET career, and I could tell you the number one issue that I see that causes the most problems is disposable types in .NET. And so until .NET comes up with a better way of dealing with this, it's still on us developers to do it ourselves. And it does take some work to make sure your apps won't have virtual memory leaks. So I hope you join me for that. It's going to be like an hour and a half, depending how things go with the conference. And then we'll have a wrap up at the end. So I hope you all make it. Go to thecodequalityconf.com to register. And also, we're also raising money for the Voice of Slum, which I talk about every week on my show. And also, I've partnered with Telerik to give away some software and a ticket to a conference. And I've also partnered with submain.com, and we'll be giving away copies of GoStock, which I use for all my XML documentation, and Code It Right for static code analysis. We'll be giving copies of those away too. So, but to win something, you have to be there live. If you're not live, you're not going to win. Let's just put it that way. So you got to watch live. All right. I just released at the beginning of the month my second version of Spargin for .NET 6. I've been working really hard on this, including adding a lot more benchmarking tests, unit tests, new code, and things like that. So I hope you go check it out. It's up on NuGet, or if you want the source, you can go to GitHub and get all the source and see. And if you want to speak about code documentation, if you want to see how I document my code, because I'm very, very stringent on how well I document my code, you can go check out Spargin and see exactly how I do it. And I use GoStock, which really takes almost no time at all. So if you say, oh my gosh, I got to document my code, just get GoStock and it will take care of most of the heavy lifting for you. So speaking of Spargin, every time I do a release of Spargin, I put out an article about the new things in it. And so there's the article. That's my latest article on CSharpCorner. It just came out this week. So I hope you will go check it out and use the code and or the NuGet packages. And if you have any ideas for articles, please make sure to email me or text me, and because I'm always looking for ideas. Otherwise, you'll just have to read about what I want to talk about. So all right, I want to bring on Billy Hollis. Billy is an internationally known UX design generalist, software architect, and team leader. He's a longtime speaker at major tech conferences with over 400 sessions on software development, IT practices, and UX design. He leads a team of world-class multi-platform developers at Next Version Systems, where the team creates and implements trailblazing UX design. I'm sure they do if Billy's in charge. Billy did some of the first books on .NET and also done video courses for Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning. Welcome, Billy.
Well, I'm happy to be here. You said your weather was perfect, but we're sitting on 78 and sunny in Nashville right now.
Oh, really?
So
we'll
compete with you right there, at least for today.
But see, that's our weather all the time, right? So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So, and when it gets warm, and at least along the ocean here, it usually doesn't get super hot in temperature. It's the humidity that kind of kicks up the uncomfortableness. And I'm sure you're used to it in Nashville, but we don't get a ton of humidity here either in San Diego. So
San Diego is my favorite city in California, and I haven't been there in a long time. So maybe I'll hit you guys up sometime the next year or two.
You should. After I booked you to come on the show, I was thinking, when's the last time I saw Billy like in real life? And I think I'd have to go research it, but in my mind at least, the last time I saw you in real life was when you and Carl were doing the live recording of .NET Rocks at my user group here.
2010, I think, something like that.
Something, yeah. It's been
that was a little fun experiment because we basically decided to run that show as just a series of almost comedy sketches, really.
Yeah.
But comedy aimed at developers, things that people actually could take some lessons from. And my favorite moment there was I had Carl almost fell off his chair laughing at one of the jokes. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. I miss Carl too. I haven't seen him since he was doing the Blazer Road show right before COVID hit. Actually, he got COVID in California, I think, like right after he was here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they had to cancel the tour, and he had to quarantine in his hotel and go back home after that. And that's the last time I saw Carl.
I would kind of tell everybody that we are getting back to some approximation of normal. The conferences are beginning back up. I was in Stockholm in May and had just a tremendous time at DevSum there. I've got about 4 conferences slated between now and the end of the year. And the in-person work with clients, it has come back. quite a lot. Last year, it was all, let me tell you, doing UX design virtually has some real challenges.
I bet it does.
It actually has a few advantages too that we could talk about if people were interested, but the collaborative aspects of UX design are really hard to do if you're not in person. But I've had 3 in a row where I actually sat down with the team, went through what we needed to do, and those kind of projects, all 3 of them ended up with some really innovative results. And that's just enormously satisfying to work through UX design with a company. In 2 out of the 3 cases, we're talking about commercial software companies where they really need for their software to be understandable for a variety of reasons to sell it and support it. And I was really happy with the way it turned out. So I'm hopeful that we'll see a chain of those, that we'll get back to normal, because David, I'm kind of getting close to retirement here.
me too, hopefully.
I don't have time to take another 2 years out with some pandemic. So
yeah. It can't be. I mean, I haven't spoken in public since COVID hit. I mean, since what was it, November or October of 2019, I guess. And I'm not even scheduled to speak publicly until I go to India in October. And so, it's, I don't know about you during COVID time, but, I love speaking in person. That's, I don't like doing virtual conferences and things like that. I prefer in person. There's so much more you gain from a conference being in person than you do virtually. And especially speaking, that was an outlet for me, that I haven't had in a long time. So I've had a hard time dealing with it. I don't know about you.
Well, I was lucky enough to have a session just before things began. I did a session in London on UX design principles, particularly how the visual and cognitive systems work. And people can see that on YouTube, by the way. It's like 15,000 views. And that was the week before everything clamped down for the pandemic. And I didn't do anything but virtual stuff for a long time. And when you have no sense of whether the audience is really gaining anything from what you're telling them, that is, as a speaker, a very frustrating situation to be in. You still project, you still do your best, and the other thing that you don't get is that when you're done, people hit the leave button and they're gone. And your opportunities, no talking, no opportunities to follow up on things where somebody goes, now, when you talked about this, you just don't see that. And it was a joy to get back to some of the in-person conferences and actually talk to people at a level that went into some depth beyond just the session itself. So I'm looking forward to doing a lot of that this year. I think I'm going to be probably in Eastern Europe for one session, and in Minnesota and in Oslo, and then back in Las Vegas, I think, for Richard Campbell's session.
Cool.
The conference there.
Oh yeah. Richard's. Yeah. I'm so looking forward to going. I mean, I'm looking forward to doing my, talk at the Code Quality Conference next week. But, like you said, it's, I don't know about every speaker out there, but, I feed off the audience and, and just like when I play music in front of an audience, right, you feed off the audience, and I kind of do the same thing, when I'm speaking also. And if anybody's been to one of my sessions, they should know that I look at everybody the entire time, right?
Yeah.
I'm always looking at people. I'm always judging. I'm always looking at their eyes, seeing if they're getting what I'm understanding, things like that. And you just don't get that virtually. And I know people make comments, but still it's not, it's not the same. And speaking of comments, make sure you start typing your questions for Billy now so we can ask Billy. Unfortunately, because of the time, we don't get a lot of live questions, but I think you and I will have plenty to talk about for the next 40 minutes.
Speaking of that code quality thing, I got a great example that might fit into somebody's sort of explanation of what's going on, because one of the projects I was working on recently was in Montana, and I had to do some flight changes and such for over 24 hours, something like 36 hours, I think. The entire back end of Delta's app and website for changing flights was down.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get flights changed. Now you think about this. this is a strategic system for their company. This is not really optional to get this right, and
No.
yet it catastrophically failed. And it is my intuition, based on my own time in the industry, that all the airlines are having trouble with staffing right now. That they're having trouble getting pilots for their planes and their
Sure.
cancellations. Well, the system, as it was conceived and written by people in our industry, was probably written for kind of a mainstream, here's the typical sort of case. And nobody really took the time to build in the resilience for a situation where you have unexpected things like extra canceled flights.
Right.
So now you're seeing a system that catastrophically failed because of some extra load on it. And the fallback system is human beings on a phone call.
Yeah.
What do you think happened to that?
And they don't have the people for that either.
Yeah,
right?
you don't have nearly enough. And this, I'm sure there are people that went through this entire episode that will never book with Delta again.
Yeah.
So that's a case where our lack of responsibility, our lack of building the quality into the systems that we create has some major financial implications for the people who commission the software. And I see too many of those cases. I have a tag on my Twitter account, Rust Age of Software, where I just kind of put those up there. But yeah, I don't think there's any shortage of examples for the people who want to talk about code quality. Although I tend to talk, code quality is important in and of itself, but I tend to talk more about app quality.
Right. You talk about the user part of it.
Right. Yeah. The user part and the architecture part and how the services fit together and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I do have firsthand knowledge on how some of these back-end systems work in these travel industry companies. And I learned this year, and oh my God, their back-end systems are just awful. I mean, really awful,
Why is that? I mean, this is critical for them. Why?
They're working on 20-year-old software, right? And some of their apps some of the systems they have are still over 20 years old, even now. And some of the, so with the travel industry, even with Delta, it might not affect Delta as much as if you're one of the companies providing these systems for the travel industry. But, some of these third-party vendors that travel industries need to hit to find out if they could do a reservation for a car or something, right? Some of those responses take over a minute to come back, right? From this other company, a minute, right? And I'm just going, talk about a shitty, no wonder people get pissed off at these travel sites, is because the companies that are providing these are just so far behind, right? And even if you go up another layer, there's still, everybody in the travel industry is super far behind. Let's just put it that way, right? And that's, so whenever these, systems go down, either it's checking people in or whatever at the airport, when that happens, I go, well, I know why it's happening. These companies have not put any money or talent into fixing these issues, right? And what you were talking about, systems going down, like last Sunday, my cable was out for most of the day, and I was sitting around going, okay, well, I can't watch my streaming stuff, but how about if there's somebody that their medical device relies on the internet, right? And Spectrum went down for the better part of the day on Sunday here, right? And none of that stuff works, right? And then also the thing what you reminded me of, I just finished this really, really great book that I recommend to everybody out there. They haven't read it. It's called The Phoenix Project. It's about this horribly gone wrong project at an auto parts manufacturer here in America. And it's a fictional story based on real things. But I just got done with it. And one of the things they were talking about at the end and how they improved their system was, once they got everything working and once they were able to do deployments in just, a few minutes as opposed to days, right? They started purposely building in systems that would actually bring down some of those systems periodically, during the day, right? And no one would know what system it would be. It would just go down. And that was their way of testing in live scenario if they have fault tolerance with their system.
Yeah.
right? Because
Whether there are
you can design that, but if you're not testing it regularly, you don't know if it works.
Well,
Right?
that's my impression, that not just in travel, but in pretty much all of the complex distributed systems we have now, is that the teams, of course, I have some sympathy. You talked about the 20-year-old software.
Yeah.
I also have sympathy for even modern systems because the complexity is just absolutely crushing.
It is.
And because of that, teams often feel like it's a success if they just get sort of the mainline average way things are supposed to go.
Right.
If they get that channel working, it's like they're so excited that they even got that working, that they don't start looking at the edge cases and the resilience. There's always more features to be added. There's always more stuff on the backlog. There's always reasons why that they want to get back to writing code for new stuff instead of sort of looking at the big picture. I honestly think, though, that as an industry, we've dug ourselves into this hole.
Oh, we have. Yeah.
And one of the main ways we did is that there is not a lot of perceived value in people who do big picture sort of thinking.
Right.
That is the value. If you go into an interview and you're trying to get on a team or something like that, it's going to be all about what JavaScript frameworks do you know, and what agile processes do you like, and it's going to be a lot of very granular things. And I don't mean to imply that these things aren't important and helpful in doing software, but when's the last time that you experienced a situation where an interview focused in on how do you look at this overall problem in some kind of big picture way? We don't see that. And actually one of the symptoms that I see from that, and this has become apparent to me in about the last 3 or 4 years, is that I go in to teams, even in large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, and the software development teams, they might range up to a couple dozen people that I'm working with. They have an inability to come to a consensus understanding about what the big problems they're trying to solve are.
Right.
One of the things I do when I go into these situations is to try to put my own vision for what you're trying to do at the very beginning, which is, let's oversimplify it a bit, but it's still a useful framework to think about it. When you're trying to do a new application or a major revision, then you got big problems to solve. That's the reason you do the thing in the first place. You've got medium problems to solve, and you got small problems to solve.
Right.
And so at first you want to go through enough understanding phase that you already know how to solve the big problems before you lay down a line of code. And what I'm seeing is that, number one, most people in this industry don't have the patience to do that.
No,
and number two, when the team starts trying to attack these big problems and go through the understanding phase, they are subject to something I call thrashing or spinning. There is a difference of opinion of factions on the team about exactly what the problem is and how to approach it. And I have seen teams literally sit and spin for 6 months to a year on a pretty critical, important problem. So that's, and so basically somebody just gives up at some point without actually thinking about what the solution ought to be. So we don't really have a lot of people. How many people do you know, David, who are specialists in going into a team and facilitating their way past these problems and getting to an understanding phase, kind of business process, understanding things to help the team achieve that we understand the big problems before we start working on them? How many people in this industry do you know who do that?
Not many, and that's why we have all these crappy applications out there, right? And you were just talking about the interview process, and since I'm in the process of looking for a new job right now, I have been going through this process, which I hate because it's gotten so much worse these days. I know it's different for you, but for me, when I'm still looking for jobs or contracts, that process has gotten to the point where I don't even want to get up in the morning. It is so traumatic, right? And so to give you an example of what recently happened to me at a very large, well-known company in America, I was hiring, they were interviewing for me for like a lead position or something like that. The only question they were able to ask me during the technical interview was, how do you reverse a string? And as soon as they, as soon as they asked me that, I go, it's over, right? I'm not sure if I want to work here anymore, right? Because if that's your question to somebody that has been in this industry for 28 years, you don't know what you want, right?
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but I feel like it's kind of necessary. One of my most popular video courses right now is on LinkedIn Learning. It's how to interview a developer. Basically, it's the careers and perhaps the most important resource for the video course is a list that I started back in the 90s. Here are the questions I ask.
Right.
Here's why I ask them. Here's the
list.
Answers I'm looking for. Here's answers that indicate that this person is not a good candidate. And so for anybody who's stuck in that position of, see, the thing about it is, reverse the character of a string. Okay, that's been kind of one of those silly ass questions that has made its way into interviews for quite a long time, because it kind of applies to all. But the core problem is that the people who are interviewing developers are given no preparation for it at all, and they often just kind of go in and make it a chat. So if you really want to prepare properly to go in and interview developers, then I'm not much on gratuitous self-promotion, but that's what that class on LinkedIn Learning is for, and it's done pretty well. It came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it really didn't get much traction for a while because people had other things to worry about. But starting about a year ago, the views started going up, and I start getting feedback about it. So anybody who's in that position, you can look at how I interview developers using the actual questions in many cases that I use for it. And one more point before I sort of, because I know there's a limited amount that people want to listen about interviewing. As you said, it's just it's a horrible experience. But
it is.
One of the reasons it's horrible is that there's been a recent trend by people who are more on the HR side of things towards something called structured interviewing. In structured interviewing, every candidate is asked exactly the same questions in the same order. And of course, the intent of that is to try to get some kind of consistency. The problem with it is you're not really going to find out about what's special about somebody. By asking the same questions of everybody. I mean, that technique would work great if people were potatoes. If they were just a commodity that you're trying to grade, but they're not. And I have to assume that in many cases, I mean, the HR people don't know how to interview developers. We're weird, mysterious creatures for them in the first place. And so they seized on this as kind of their way of doing it. And I think there might be a certain amount of laziness in it too, that they don't know what else to do. So they just come up with standard questions and don't try to develop the skill. What I would say to people after interview is it is a skill, and you need to understand it, understand the techniques that you're going to use, understand the questions you're going to ask, and prepare for it. And I know you got code to write, but really, do you want to be cleaning up a guy's code because you didn't interview him and he got on your team and wrote some real crap? I mean, so I think there's some self-interest for us to learn how to interview better.
Well, I'm definitely gonna have to check out your course, because that's one thing especially with like this reversing the string question they asked me, I was going, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, even this week, about, most of the people who are doing interviews have no training on doing interviews, right? I don't have any formal training, but I've been doing it since my very first programming job, right? So I've been doing it 28 years. And at one company here in San Diego, I interviewed pretty much every .NET developer and manager that came into the company. And that frustration of even that process, 12 plus years ago, made me create my How to Survive the Technical Interview conference session, which is on video. And then I also released a book on the same thing. And but my book is for the interviewee trying to get through the technical interview part of it, right? Because because if you can't get through that, there's no reason to hire you, in my opinion. And I basically took all the wrong things I saw people do and put it in this book, right? But I wish.
Long book, David.
Long book. Long book. So the process, I think, these days has not only gotten worse it's it's just gotten worse for a lot of reasons, right? And my way of trying to solve it is by writing and or talking to people or doing videos and trying to figure out a way out of this hole, because this leads us into basically the conversation. Part of today's conversation is just all these crappy apps we use these days. And why is that? Well, part of it is the interview process, because to me, the number one thing for me as a technical interviewer is my job is to understand the interviewee's analytical thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm trying to figure out, right? And I base questions on that to try to suck it out of them, because we're not good at telling that kind of information, right? So it's my job to get that out of people, right? And that's what all my questions are designed around, right? Not how to reverse a freaking string.
Yeah.
Right. That's just makes no sense to me. Even to beginners, I wouldn't even ask that question.
And it may be worthwhile for the audience to for me to do just kind of finish off this subject with one tangible example of the question. This is actually the favorite question, I think, on the list. I got stopped by a woman who ran a large programming staff for a railroad while I was in the casino in Las Vegas, because she had seen me do the session at the conference. The question she liked best was, what is the weirdest bug you've ever encountered, and how did you solve it?
Right.
Now, see,
I asked something like that too.
Yeah. That sort of gets into, that tells you a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
If they've never really encountered weird bugs, that tells you something about their depth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find out how they solve the bug, that tells you something about their problem solving process.
Right.
So,
yeah. And so, so here we are in the state of software development these days, and even like this morning, this week I've been seeing people even from Microsoft complaining about Outlook has ads in it now. I mean, can you believe that? Outlook is advertising to you? Come on, really?
Well, a lot of decision making in companies is done by people. Well, first of all, I think there's a generation of people making these decisions that don't have any emotional revulsion towards advertising the way that you and I do. I want to purchase a product and use it.
Right.
All right. It's as simple as that for me. And the people who are getting into these positions are all about revenue and profit maximization. It doesn't really matter to them what the long-term impact is on their customer loyalty and things like that, which I think is short-sighted.
It's very short-sighted.
In the immediate time frame, then they're able to show some numbers. I mean, they measure the numbers, they measure the money they get from that, and they don't really have a way to measure what the costs of that were in terms of affecting the customer base. They've got the numbers though. Look how much money we made by doing this.
Right.
And that is very short-sighted. And I tend to, I have an interesting approach to dealing with a lot of those things, websites and apps and everything else. I mean, you're a tech guy. You know what the host file is, right?
Sure.
So in the host file, you can block any domains you want.
Yeah.
And there is out there, there's a site run by a Windows MVP from a ways back that's got a list of all the ad servers.
Oh, really?
And he keeps it updated. So I grabbed that, and I also add some things on my own. For example, I blocked Facebook on my system. So now I've got my host file in place. They can't serve me ads because my host file won't let them. And that solves a lot of the problem. Yeah.
But, well, to me, it's just, if I pay for a product, I don't want a freaking ad in it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's why I like streaming. There's no ads. I don't want a streaming service that shows me ads. That's why I'm paying for the damn thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like Disney just announced a service where you pay for it and you watch ads. And I'm going, and I think Netflix is toying around with the same idea. And I'm just, and to me, and I've written about this recently, that, today in today's software world, we're not stuck to one choice anymore, right? For the most part, right? I mean, the choices of OSs is still pretty small, but as far as the other applications that we use in a normal day, we don't have one choice, right? And it doesn't take much to upset customers. They'll just go to the next choice, and they will never come back. They won't come back. I won't come back to a company I've left. No, I won't do it. Because they've already ticked me off for some reason. So why take a chance on them again, right? So
you're a hard man, David. But no, I mean, I'm pretty much the same way. I've abandoned. I have a nice long list of companies that I have abandoned and that I don't expect to go back to. I'm pondering this week whether to add Delta to the list since they left me stranded in Minneapolis when they canceled my flight.
And these airlines, especially because of all this shenanigans going on, there's only a few airlines I even like taking anymore, right? One of them is actually Delta, and that number gets shrunken down to okay, well, if I'm not going to take Delta, then I'm down to Alaska and American, right?
Yeah,
because I don't like any of the other ones, and so our choices in some ways are shrinking because of these outages and things like that are preventable, right? A lot of stuff like with the travel industry is preventable, right? It's just no one wants to do it until it happens.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain amount of volatility in the entire economic system at this point, sort of fueled by a lot of the pandemic. And most of the decision makers don't really have, we talked about this earlier in software, and it's true in the bigger economy, is that the people involved don't generally have a lot of training in how you build resilient systems.
Right.
And resilient systems is not just about software. It's also about business processes that have ways of correcting when things start to go wrong. The people who are making decisions don't have any training in designing and building those kind of systems. Now, there are exceptions. One of our main clients is a food manufacturer, and they have a conscious corporate philosophy about those things, but it helps that they're a privately owned company, a family owned company. Even though they're multi-billion dollars, they're privately owned, and so they have the luxury of being able to say, no, we could probably do this and cut some corners and get by with it for some period of time, but eventually it would turn around and bite us. So they don't do that. And so they're a wonderful client for us to work with because they recognize the value. So, I mean, if you're a company and you want to get a lot of this stuff done and you want to build in some resilience, the people who can do it, as we talked about earlier, are very limited. It's hard to find and they're expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are.
That's the thing about it, is that there's always, it seems in most of the companies that we sticker shock a lot of companies out of doing business with us.
Sure.
Because they start talking to us and we start talking about hourly rates and they don't want to hear it.
No.
But I mean, if you are coming in and saving them billions of dollars, these hourly rates don't look so bad anymore.
Right. Exactly.
But it's hard to convince them of that. And that's partially the fault of our industry, is that there are too many hucksters. There are too many people in the industry who claim to be able to do things that they can't really do. And if you're sitting in the chair with the checkbook, then you've probably had a couple of those. And you don't want to see your career affected by that. So it's just a complex mess of things. But it's kind of the trend I've noticed is that the majority of our long-term clients are in fact family-owned businesses, and they're private, because with those kinds of people, you have a greater capacity to establish the trust that's required.
And they really know the business.
They know their business.
They're just not managing a business. They came from the outside and they were hired as managers, and they didn't start the business. They don't really have any skin in the game except for they were hired to do their job. Right. Yeah. Family-owned industries are come from the family and are run by the family, and so that makes total sense to me. Yeah. So
and we're not very big as a company, so we have the luxury of kind of focusing in on companies that resonate with us on that kind of philosophy, and as a result, I think we have some great examples of adding quite a lot of value, and then of course. I talked about the design facilitation thing earlier. one of the best ways, I think, to establish trust with a company is if you do assist them through solving a problem that they can't solve on their own. Then if that solution that you come up with has a lot of value, those people are now just going to use you whenever they can, because the shortage of people who really know how to get things done in the industry is so severe that once you've demonstrated the credibility to get things done, you won't have any trouble. But getting over that hump of them really believing that you can do it, that's a big challenge. A lot of people come to me going, okay, yeah, I would like to be in kind of the independent role that you're in, that your company's in, Billy. And I go, well, that's great, but number one, you got to be able to do it.
Right.
And number two, the process by which you build your credibility and your reputation is not an easy one. I was speaking for free to user groups back in the early 90s to start building some of the credibility that I later leveraged into books and things like that. It takes time.
Yeah. And, I think, and also in these days with probably companies that, aren't family owned, businesses, is that, they just think if they get enough butts in seats, it will fix things. Right?
Yeah.
But they don't understand that, I even had arguments with the VP at a company here going, can I trade a couple of beginners in for at least an intermediate? No, you must hire beginners. And I'm going, well, this is retarded, right? Because that makes no sense just to hire a bunch of beginners.
They don't understand the nonlinear nature of capability in the industry. And they don't understand the impact and process of innovation either. I'd probably tell you about a particular example that illustrates it in a way that some companies, some managers get, others just don't. We went in to 3M to help them do a product back in the 2010 timeframe. And they had made an attempt to design this system for radiology reporting, and they really were not satisfied with the results at all. Actually, they copied one of our early WPF applications. If staff links means anything to you, that was.
I remember you showing them in the early days of
WPF, in the early days of WPF. It was an example. It was copied hundreds or thousands of times, because I still have people come. We use that as our pattern. Well, that's complimentary. On the other hand, it was designed for a particular set of circumstances.
Sure.
Designs aren't universal. Designs are circumstance specific. So 3M tried to apply that design, and it wasn't really a fit. So they called us in. Well, I was happy to go up there. There were some nice people, and they really got it in terms of innovation. I think 3M as a company has a culture of innovation. And so that certainly did help. So we went into this, look at this radiology reporting package. And at that time, all radiology reports looked like they were produced on Selectric typewriters, basically, because that's kind of the way it had been defined back in the 50s and 60s when some of this stuff happened. And the AS400s and the machines that had supplanted the Selectric typewriters still that's the way a radiology report looked. Okay. So if you know anything about it, you know that radiologists have this language to describe where something is in an image, in an X-ray or MRI or something. In the upper left medial, they've got that whole language for that. And so we had people now who had been working on this radiology reporting system for 3M. It was in Windows Forms at the time for 10, 15 years. They had a lot of experience in this field. But, there's a certain rut that you get into that really is a barrier to innovation. So the most valuable thing I did in that project, I mean, we were really happy with the way it turned out, because this product went from being a second-tier product to a top-tier product and sold about 400 million worth in the first 5 years that they put it out. So it was a success. But there were several reasons for it. They had a great staff, and I don't mean to minimize the role of their people who were extremely talented. But the most valuable thing I did was to look at the radiology report and go, well, here you are describing this piece of an image that's on another screen. Why don't you just grab that piece you're talking about and drop it right in the middle of the radiology report?
Right.
Because technologically, the WPF round of things was what made it pretty easily capable to do those things.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the radiology department saw that, that was what fueled the interest in the product. And I mean, look, I'm just a guy coming in from the outside. I have a little bit of training in healthcare and science and such, but nevertheless, why aren't the people who deal with this stuff all the day thinking about how you apply technology to innovate?
Mhm.
And the answer is they've done it a certain way for 10 years. And you almost have to have that outside perspective to come in and break you loose from the past and
Exactly.
think about how you innovate.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the project that actually I became a patent inventor on, right? And I kind of did that with this flower grower site in Northern California, where I wanted to understand their process. And this is I talk about and say this a lot, that what I feel my job is a software engineer is to make someone else's workflow better, right?
Yeah.
And whatever they're trying to do, whether it's personally or in business or whatever, right? That's my job, is to make their workflow better. And so I can't really understand that workflow until I understand them, right?
Yeah.
And so like for this that I'm a patent inventor now, is because I went to the grower site at like 5 or 4:30 in the freaking morning, right? And spent most of the day with everybody at the site, from the managers to the pickers to the packers. And I didn't ask them one single question about software. All I did was ask them about their workflow and what do they do? Where does this piece of paper go when you take it from here? Where does it go after that? And when it goes there, what happens to it after that? Because that was the problem I was trying to solve, is those workflow problems, right? And that is, and I'm really proud of that project, because I not only did I do that, and I've even left companies who won't let me do that now, right? After that great experience, and I asked a company to spend a day with the drivers or whatever, and they say no, I go, yeah, I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
Because how could I
pretty much
deliver
me.
great software if I don't understand what the issue is, right?
I've had to turn people down for that precise reason. I've had a case where I go, okay, I need to observe the users. I need to understand their job. I need to get inside their head. And they go, yes, well, we've had business analysts do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And here's the binder. Here's this binder that describes all of that. And so you can, no. See, I think when we're going to have to build a thing, there are things that we want to know and need to know that business analysts don't think about.
Right.
The one thing that I tend to key in on is, you're going to give me that binder, and it's going to give this long list of requirements, but there's not going to be any prioritization in it. You're not going to say this is critical to these people's daily work, and they use it 50 times a day. And if you don't get that right, then your software's not going to be a success.
Yeah.
Business analysts don't think about it in those terms. So yeah, I've walked away from a few places like that as well, because I don't know how to solve a problem if I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I have to see it to understand it.
As far as I can recall, there's only been one company, it was here in San Diego, that I worked at, that they had their own UX business analyst team, right? And when I first got there, I was really excited, because finally I don't have to do that. Somebody else is going to be doing it, and they'll do a good job and everything. Well, one day I was walking past one of their cubes, and I heard the guys on the phone with a prospective customer or a client and asking them how the software should work. And I wanted to slap them, going, no, you don't ask them, right? You don't ask them that question. They're not software engineers, right? They're not software designers.
And they're not designers. That's the key part. They're not designers.
Right. So you just, I don't know why you're here if that's the questions you're asking, right? And
well, I think a lot of that turns around first, and I've been doing a session recently at conferences about this. The term design is badly overloaded. That it ranges all the way from simple visual design all the way up to business process reengineering, design thinking, with several intermediate points.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people who operate on the visual design end of things that's what they know how to do. And let's be honest about it. Most of them are not really good at some of the facilitation aspects of design thinking. So they tend to mentally project this definition of design that is in the territory they understand. That's what they want to do. That's what they know how to do. So when they talk about design, as far as they're concerned, that's what it is. And that leaves off the possibility of, for example, interaction design. How does the user interact and go through their workflow in the software? Or all the way up to how do multiple applications within this organization work with one another to accomplish an entire organization-wide workflow. The visual designers are really good at certain things. They get the aesthetics right. They get the cosmetics right. They're usually pretty good about layout and things like that. So there's some value add. But as I show in my slides for that presentation, there's like visual design is like a little bit of value add. And then you go up to things like data visualization and things, which is more. And then you get up to interaction design, and that's kind of more. And then you get up to organization-wide design thinking, which is even more. So you can, and all of those, as you move up that chain, you have to invest greater time and effort in doing that design. But the return on that is the further you go up that chain, the more value you get back. And it is frustrating to deal with designers whose view of design is so constrained. And I came to this understanding on my own, because you go out into the design books, what I just described to you, I've never seen in a book about design. And that kind of baffles me.
I think people are missing the human part of it, right?
Yeah. Why would it? See, we developers are not supposed to be very good at that kind of thing, are we? So why is this ex-developer coming in and putting a cast on the process of design that has worked in for many of our clients that is not very similar at all to the way most professional design people look at it. So that's kind of one of our problems in trying to integrate design into the business.
Yeah, it's, one of my frustrations, and I say this probably on Twitter too much, is that, the apps that I use, I can't believe the people that wrote them they can't be using them, because I mean, it would drive me insane if I wrote that application and I'm using it, right? Yeah. And I would go back to the company every day going, oh, we have to fix this. We have to fix this. But I swear they don't use the actual apps
they don't.
They create.
They don't. They don't. And they have, developers tend to, I don't know. This is sort of Billy Hollis's theory of how we ended up where we are in some respects. Because I started out in the Visual Basic world. And it was more of let's take people with more of a verbal mindset and a business mindset and let them get in on developing software. And then we got Java and .NET with these huge, massive, complex APIs. We started filtering those other people out of the ecosystem. We don't have nearly as many of those people. And one of the consequences is the people we have left after 20 years of filtering them out, the other people out, who we've got left are mostly people who really sort of like the code aspects of what's going on. They don't do very well with the people aspects. They're not particularly verbal. And you can see that show up in things like, Microsoft has never gotten workflow right.
No, they can't do it.
They can't do it. And I mean, all the way from BizTalk and orchestration, which wasn't done right, and two different versions in .NET.
WCF and
really worked.
Or not whatever it's called, a WF in .NET. Yeah.
And they're in the process right now of not getting it right in Azure.
Right.
and I, having looked at this and done quite a lot of workflow myself, I'm pretty sure that the core of the problem is that people at Microsoft have a code-centric view of things. And so when you start talking to them about workflow, to them, it's about the code rules that move things around in the workflow.
Right.
That's the core of workflow for them. And you see that today. When you talk to them about workflow in Azure, they'll start talking about logic apps.
Yeah.
Well,
or durable apps or durable functions.
No, if you're going to look at workflow, what are the primitives? What are the essentials? Well, number one, work items. Things that need to be worked on. Number two, queues of work items, stacks of things that need to be worked on. And
decision trees. Yeah.
And then only in third place is it the rules that tell you how to work on items and how to move items from queue to queue. That's that's the fundamental primitives of workflow, and none of the Microsoft efforts have even come close to looking at it that way.
No.
And it's because of the code-centric nature, I think, of the people doing it. People at Microsoft are smart. I've been on a lot of design meetings. They're very, very smart people, but their perspective and their understanding of general business processes and workflows is unfortunately quite limited.
Yeah. I definitely feel that a lot with Microsoft people. You're exactly right. Brilliant people, but they live in the Microsoft bubble, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I really like, those of, not everybody does it, but those that actually do get out of their bubble and experience the rest of the world, right? To hopefully make the Microsoft products better, or Microsoft should be hiring more people, outside of them, so they can bring other, ideas and things in, right?
They should, but the culture there is that if you don't write brilliant code, you aren't going to go that far in the organization.
Right.
I'm sorry, that's just that's the way it is there. And so that is an institutional inertia that ideally Microsoft should overcome. I'd really like to see them overcome that.
Yeah. Mahesh, who runs CSharpCorner, he said, I think most developers don't spend time learning business customers and end users, and hence never build good systems. That's exactly right, Mahesh, and that's what we've been talking about.
Mahesh, I know Mahesh. Yeah. Hey.
So, Mahesh's got a question. Do you think open source in 6 weeks academies online training are creating bad developers who don't understand software engineering?
That's creating developers whose view of what software is extremely superficial.
Right.
It's typically very biased towards front end and mobile apps that tend to be much simpler than
enterprise systems.
Enterprise systems run American business. A lot of those are desktop systems. Others are kind of desktop light, but running in the browser. Those are complex apps that go so far beyond anything you do in the mobile world that the people who only write those kinds of, I completely understand these folks who write their first mobile app and they get it in the store and they're extremely proud of that, and they should be. Okay, if that app accomplishes something substantial, something useful for people,
more than popping a bubble wrap.
So I understand people doing that, and I understand why the entry point for them is typically these 6-week academies where they learn some JavaScript frameworks and such as that, because we don't have any good entry points like we used to have back in the 90s. We had Access and FoxPro and Visual Basic and Power Builder, and we don't have any of those anymore as entry points into the ecosystem. So that's the least bad entry point we've got. But the positioning is study for 6 weeks and we'll get you a job as a developer. And no, after 6 weeks, you're barely qualified to be a gopher for the team at that point.
You're probably not even an intern at that point, right?
But the people who are trying to keep it cheap, get software development done on the cheap, they seize onto that.
Right. They do.
And of course, it doesn't help that the people who are capable of getting things done are very, very busy and in demand. And so a lot of people who run teams have been burned. They've been burned in the following sense. That they get people who do have some level of talent and they develop them along, and then they don't realize the fact that you have now sunk 2 years into this person and they actually now can write real software instead of just a front end or a mobile app. Now their value as an employee has gone up by a factor of probably 3.
Right.
But the accountants in your company won't let you pay them 3 times as much.
Sure.
And maybe the
that's why they leave and go to a different company.
So they go somewhere else. Right. So now they've been burned. Oh, I invested all this.
I have stories about that.
Why should I spend my time trying to bring these people along and keeping good people? They're just going to leave me for more money somewhere else. So yeah, it's
they probably have a bad personal life too if they think that way.
well, yeah, and I mean to a certain extent, the shortage of people who actually can do a good job of developing software, that shortage has been around as long as I've been in this business. And I started writing code for money in 1978.
Oh,
there's
dang.
always been a shortage of people who could really do it.
Yeah.
There's never been a shortage of people who see the money and go, boy, I want some of that.
Yes.
They don't really have the passion or necessarily even the talent.
Right. They see the dollar signs.
Yeah. They just see the dollar signs and they go. And as I said, the managers don't have some serious misunderstandings about what to do about this. Let me tell you a true story from the 1990s. I was on a software team, and there was a guy that was developing one of the modules of this suite we were working on. He'd been working on it for 18 months, and he wasn't anywhere close to being done.
18 months.
18 months. And I came in and I had a very comparably sized module, and I finished it in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gives you an idea of the scale. So, and the problem was this guy couldn't code his way out of a wet paper bag.
Yeah.
He was just no good at coding.
Right.
And he didn't need to be in that job. But when the new manager came in and was talking about how to fix things, I said, well, you need to get this guy out of this job.
Right.
Get him in something else, testing or whatever.
Right.
Because you're doing him no favors.
And you're hurting the team.
To keep him in a job that he's not any good at. It's hurting the team. And he's going to end up in his 40s, kicked out on the street by somebody with less willingness to indulge him than you have. And her, oh no, he just needs more training. No. One of the old sayings there are people who believe you can teach calculus to a horse.
Yeah.
If you just, are very patient with the horse.
Right.
And I just don't have that. For better or worse, there are people who have what it takes up here to get things done. Mm-hmm. And they think the right way. They to communicate with computers and tell them what to do. And there are people who really just don't. Yeah. And those people that don't need to be developing software. I don't care how much they are attracted by the money. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the fact that, look, this is a stressful business. I don't go out telling people you ought to get into this business. You almost have to, you have to have a passion for it. You have to have some native ability for it. And you have to balance that against the kinds of stresses that we have that most blue white collar type jobs do not. So yeah, the shortage is with us. It will always be with us. And I don't know what to do about that.
I don't either.
The only potential answer that I see is, and we're starting to see the demand for the low code and no code environments, layers of abstraction that make it so that you just don't have to know as much.
Right.
And you can focus in on the business aspects of things. You don't have to be a super duper coder and know everything there is about security and REST calls and stuff like that in order to write an app. And the fact that we've got about a dozen of these companies making a run at that space tells me that there's quite a bit of latent demand there. Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah. I actually, I don't say this much publicly, but back a long time ago, I thought we'd already be further along than we are now with that. Right. I thought by now in 2022, we'd be doing more of that and less of what we actually are doing. Right.
I completely agree. I worked with a 4GL type product, character based, kind of looked COBOL-ish in the early 1990s. And there are concepts in that product that have never made it into any mainstream development tool that I've seen.
Yeah.
That promoted development that helped you put metadata. The key thing is metadata.
Right.
That you ideally do not want to describe apps in terms of code. Right. You want absolutely as much of the app as possible to be described in metadata.
Yes.
And then have engines that use that metadata to make things happen. That would allow you, for instance, to have a system that the metadata described the app. You could have an engine that projected a browser-based version of it, and another one that projected a mobile app, and another one that projected some kind of desktop thing. Because you wouldn't you wouldn't have to do the details to expose those different UIs. The app logic, the workflow that the user would be the same for all of them. And you would take away a lot of the most tedious aspects of application development and the aspects that change all the time. I mean, how much time is spent today just nursing these websites along, these web apps along, because of all the frameworks that are involved.
Right. Or just, especially if to me, if you don't start off the right way, then you're going to end up with something that's certainly not ideal, and certainly that's hard to change. And so therefore you're just going to be band-aiding the whole thing until it falls down. Right.
Yeah.
Or until your competitor takes over. Right. You're just going to be band-aiding it. And that's not the way to do any kind of successful app and or business, to me, in my mind.
Yeah.
Right?
And it bothers me to see a lot of the process people who think that the solution to that is just more Band-Aids.
Yes.
That they just rapid emergency, flat out run all the time to get new features. And there isn't anything built into a lot of those processes that does cause you to think about the resilience in the architecture and things like that.
Yeah. Especially when some companies, like, ones I've worked for, that, the management is the people that end up making decisions, and their bonuses are paid on delivering features, not quality, not anything else, features. And so that's all they drive is features, and they don't derive anything else, which lead them into the mess that they end up coming almost every time. Right.
That's kind of one of the reasons I like our business as a consulting company is split right now about 60-40 in terms of software packages and software as a service, that you're selling the software to a large group of end users, versus internal corporate software, which is about 40% of what we do. And one of the things I really like about the packaged software world, whether it's being delivered as a service on the internet or whether it's being an installed package, one of the things I really like about it is you have some pretty solid metrics for success.
Mm-hmm.
Either you sell more of that package or you don't. You get more users or you don't. Either your tech support costs go down or they don't. Right. And so now the people that are involved, the decision makers, typically are rewarded on those kinds of metrics. Mm-hmm. So they've got reasons to want to get it done right and to affect those outcomes. And they don't. I find that there's a lot more skepticism in that world about features. As I put it in my design classes, one of the most dangerous phrases in this industry is, wouldn't it be cool if? Because that's leading you down a path to a feature that appeals to people like us. Mm-hmm. But does it actually appeal to the users?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe not. You better make sure it does.
Yeah. Well, I could talk for hours with you, but we're already over time.
Well, I appreciate your patience with me babbling about things, because when I get started,
I think it's great. I could listen to you all day. I mean, that's why I love coming. Whenever where you are speaking live, I never miss your sessions. And
well, that's gratifying. Thank
you. Because I still, like, long time ago, I don't know how long ago this was, in the early 2000s. You came and spoke at this event we were doing in Orange County, California. And I still remember that session today. Right. And so those are the kind of sessions that, I wish we had more of, and I wish more people would go to, because, what I learned from you in a single session, I can use my entire career. Right. As opposed to the newfangled framework thingy. Right.
Yeah. Which is 18 months from now, nobody will.
Yeah. Nobody will care. Well, like someone just said, that most coders don't remember what they did a few weeks ago. And John, I don't remember what I did a couple of days ago. So yeah, it's. And I know that's because of my age, but it's definitely. But yeah, I've got to get going. I didn't get to any of the questions I wanted to ask you, so I'm definitely going to have you come back on the show, because I think this is a great topic, and that I really love talking to you about, because, like I said in some of my tweets, or in the post about this, that you're a no nonsense guy and you tell it like it is. And I like that. And I wish we had more people like you speaking up in this world. I think things will get better.
Well, thank you. I'd certainly like to believe that I'm not really very subject to peer pressure.
I'm not too much either, but so I will ask one question that I'll keep the others for next time. But I was thinking maybe have you back on later in the year or early next year. Maybe you can talk about Maui if you guys are using Maui at your company yet. Are you using Maui at your company yet?
We're investigating that as
Yeah.
one of the options to go forward. We're also spending a fair amount of time trying to understand the ins and outs of Blazor.
Yeah.
And Blazor has a certain niche where I feel like it fits pretty well, but for the kinds of apps we do, it isn't obvious that it is a good fit for a lot of those. And then I also spend a fair amount of time. My go-to right now is the Uno platform, just because I got 12, 15 years of XAML up here.
Yeah,
I can
Uno's
leverage
good too.
using the Uno platform. And so all of those are kind of players. I have no idea which one is going to come forward and really start to dominate. My feeling is that one of them eventually will, but I don't know which one.
Yeah, I've had 2 people from the Uno company on my show, and the last one was a couple of weeks ago. And so, yeah, it's something I want to investigate. But the last question I'll ask you before Simon gets upset at me, because, it's like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night in India right now. So what do you do for fun that's not coding or designing?
Gosh, I live in a much bigger world than most people understand. And I actually don't do that much coding anymore. I mostly do design. I spend a lot of time looking at scientific research of all kinds. I read everything. I'm a generalist, so I read all kinds of things. The book I'm reading right now, for example, is called The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. It's written by a couple of evolutionary biologists, and it's just an extremely well-written and thought-provoking book. And I inevitably wrap it all back together into some of the design and software things that I do, because my study is human behavior.
Yeah.
All right. At a very generic way of looking at it, and design is part of that, and a lot of the stuff that I do is part of that. And I go to events to watch people, and so understanding people is the biggest thing I spend time on, and that I find extremely rewarding and fun.
Oh, great. And it's been wonderful having you on the show. And like I said, I'm going to have to ask you to come back. So I hope you'll accept my invitation. And if you want to chat after the show, you can, or if you want to get to your day, I know it's later there where you live. And so, but I'm so glad you came on the show and accepted my invitation. And it was been great to catch up with you. And it's great to, talk to someone, especially, since I work at home and we've been on COVID that kind of thinks the same way I do. And I wish we had more people like you in this industry.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it quite a lot, and I'll look forward to coming back.
Great.
And we can talk a bit afterwards if you like.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Billy. That was an awesome session with Billy Hollis. I looked at the clock and it was almost, we were running out of time, and I was going, what? We just started the show. I can't believe that was the fastest show ever, I think, talking to Billy. So I can't wait to have him come back on the show. And the one thing that I kind of want to piggyback real quick before the show ends, if any of you people that run companies or teams listen to this, is if there's one thing you get from the show, is there's a lot of lack of key roles in software teams. And there's a lot of people like Billy that are excellent at this, that, need to be taken advantage of, me included. I was talking about, being interviewed to reverse a string, but that's not where my strength lies. If you're hiring me to reverse a string in .NET, I don't know why you're doing that. That's not where my expertise lends itself. I've been through the mud. I've been through many successful projects, many failed projects. I know pretty much how to do it to get the best outcome. No one's perfect, but I always try to be better, is my new saying. And so companies out there, you need to hire more people, older developers. This is where elder developers really have value, is we've been through this. We've seen it over and over. We've seen the right ways and the wrong ways to do things. And we can bring that to your company. And that's probably why Billy's company is successful. So I'm looking for a job I mean, I kind of said that because I am looking for a job, but I mean it, not just because I'm looking for a job. So, all right. Simon might be asleep by now, but don't forget to pick up a copy of my latest coding standards book. It's available on Amazon right now. I hope you go pick up a copy. This goes really well with the Code Quality Conference that's coming up on Friday. So I hope you'll get your copy if one's available in your country. And I will bring some to India in October. I can't bring too many because they're my biggest book I've released, so they're kind of heavy. So I'll bring a couple to give away at the conferences in India. So because I know it's hard to get the printed version there. All right, I have a story that I call My Adventures of Inspector Cody. The introduction's out there right now. I'm working on the second story currently. So if you want to check out who Inspector Cody is and what he's all about, I hope you will go read the intro because there's more stories and possibly comics coming later. So learn about Inspector Cody and let me know what you think about Inspector Cody. Also, don't forget to help me help the kids in India. I have 3 ways for you to help. One is either purchase my code performance book, which 100% goes to the Voice of Slum in India. Another way is to go to my GoFundMe page I have for them. You can go to that link there, or you can just go to voiceofslum.org and donate directly. I don't care which way you do it. Just please help the kids. I plan on visiting them when I'm there in October to see how things are going. But you know, kids in areas in the slums in India really need our help, and we're software engineers, and we definitely have the capability of helping them. So I hope you will help me help them. Thank you. And thanks for watching. Next week, my really good friend Magnus Martinson is coming back on the show. I can't wait to catch up with Magnus all about cloud things. And we'll probably talk about the speaker tour we're doing in October. So I didn't talk about it too much today because I want to leave that to next week where Magnus will be on the show. So don't miss the show with Magnus. He's one of my favorite people, and I love talking to him, and I'm sure you will too. Don't forget, again, the Code Quality Conference is this coming Friday. I hope you'll go to codequalityconf.com and register and join us live because we will be giving away software. We'll be doing other fun things too during the show live. I won't be on it first in the morning because it's starting around 5 a.m. my time, and I just, unless I'm up at that time, I'll be joining a little bit late. Mahesh will take the beginning of the show for me. Also, please be safe. Listen to your medical professionals about COVID. You know, I learned yesterday we had 1,200 people die in America from COVID, so we're not over this yet. And now we have monkeypox coming. And so please be safe. Please donate blood at your local blood bank. I tried to donate last Sunday, but my iron level was 1 point under. So I'm going next weekend to do blood donation. So make sure you donate to your local blood bank, whether there's COVID or not. You all know I say this every week on my show. And with that, thank you so much for watching this great show with Billy Hollis. Please make sure to email me your suggestions, comments, whatever you want, including guests who you want to see on the show to Rockin The Code World at CSharpCorner.com. And I'll see you next week with Magnus Martinson.